Welcome back and thanks so much for staying with Africa News Network. First Fast Live, our top story this hour. One of the country's biggest cybercrime shows millions of people's personal information being stolen. The personal information of approximately 30 million South Africans has been compromised, and that's more than half of the population. It's believed the information was stolen from the deeds office, including people's income estimates, addresses and contact details. This breach was revealed as the State Security Department is due to officially welcome a new minister. The theft and exposure to personal information can lead to cloning of identities, credit taken under false identity, privacy at home being jeopardized, and a threat to personal financial security.
It was unearthed by a security specialist in Australia who's done this before. He was also instrumental in some other identifying and highlighting some other hacks before. I think this is a even call it a national catastrophe, because more than half of the country citizens' information apparently has been hacked. Now, it must have come from somewhere. What worries me, or what fascinates me, is the fact that no company so far has come and said it's come from us. You know, every company should be investigating their databases and see whether they are part of this hack. We haven't had anybody coming to the fore, and probably we won't, because the Protection of Personal Information Act, which makes this a compulsory reporting if it happens, is not law yet. I don't think anything will happen. We will find out probably where it come from. I hope so, and I hope very, very strict actions are taken against these people, because nobody at this point of time knows where it came from, when it was leaked, and where it was stored and why it was stored. The fact is, it's also clear that you've mentioned the deeds office. Some of the information seemed to have come from a deeds office, but there are other information in this stash which wouldn't come from there. You know, things like income and those type of credit ratings and things which hasn't got much to do with the deeds office. So, you know, the sort of feeling is that this is more than just one database that was hacked and dumped. It may be more, and this whole thing was put together as one big stash somewhere on the internet. So who did it, why it was done, who's been able to get access to it, that's all part of the mystery that's going to be cleared hopefully in some time.
And joining us live in studios, Mr. Stephen Ambrose, a Strategy Works Consulting and Managing Director. And we have Alfred Shabalala, Right to Know campaign activist. Good evening to both of you, and thanks so much for joining us. I think when you say cyber crime, it might sound like an abstract phenomenon to some people. Mr. Ambrose, if you'll just explain the context of it and how it impacts individuals.
Well, look, essentially we live in a world where everything's on a computer somewhere. All our information, all our transactions, everything that we do on a daily basis, if you have a bank account, if you're a citizen of a country, that information is sitting on a database somewhere in the world, somewhere on some server. And that information, put together with all the other information that people have on a citizen, on a credit profile, on your banking details, is critical. You cannot operate in the modern world without access to that information. And what cyber criminals tend to do is try to extract as much of this information and use it for all sorts of purposes. One of them being cloning of people's IDs. You know, there's so many different things that can be done.
Yeah, but if you're saying there are almost multiplicity of platforms where this kind of information can sit, it's either with your health records or the bank, wherever you access services, it becomes very difficult then to contain. I mean, Right to Know, we talk about the right to access to information, etc. But in this case, it's information that is sitting in the wrong hands possibly. How do you even contain it?
Well, our view is that there must be a responsibility for any kind of holding of information. We believe that the law at the moment is trying to do that. There's been very slowly, there's been processes which we're engaging seriously with the state to say there must be a way of taking care of these issues. in our view, they've never been, the government and the business sector has never been so serious about it. Because how could you allow a situation whereby you are so negligent that this kind of a very serious issue, the information that you take consciously because of your business or because people who have to know them, there's a responsibility there. There's a reason why you are taking this information. So it should be guided so that it doesn't just get lost like that.
Can we even, Mr. Ambrose, qualify or quantify the level of vulnerability that South Africa has in this situation?
No, there have been no studies that specifically state that South Africa is X% vulnerable. The problem with all these type of databases is that they exist in multiple locations, on multiple servers, in many, many different areas, and all of them today are connected to the internet. So there is a definite hacker community that operates outside of South Africa, inside South Africa, globally, and they spend hours and days looking for vulnerabilities in these various services. And when they find those vulnerabilities, they actually actively hack these various databases and obtain this information. Obviously, credit card information is absolutely gold. There's certain hierarchy of the types of information that they want, but they're actively looking for this information everywhere. And South Africa is probably no more vulnerable than other countries. And we have got a new act coming in, the POPI Act, which will definitely make it more difficult for people and will certainly bring in standards that will allow these various companies to look after your data. But hacks do happen. They've happened all over the world. There's been hacks in America of similar scale where billions of people's information has been leaked on the web. The classic one is the Snowden hack. So there's so many different ways that this information can be sort of extracted from various databases.
And if we don't even know the genesis, there's some sort of speculation. You'll give us your perspective on where this 30 million plus South Africans' identities and personal information could have been shared, or that is compromised in terms of your security portfolio. But at this stage, it could be you and I. It's one out of two South Africans whose personal information could be lying there somewhere. And you have all of this other bureaucracy where either the banks or your insurer or your creditors would say, well, the onus was on you to make sure that your home computer is protected, for instance. So where do we even start in terms of empowering and educating consumers and finding some reprieve?
You see, the problem is that currently South Africa is actively one of the countries wherein the information is being taken. So there's always an initiative in terms of gathering this information. So the surveillance that is in this country is of high levels. So obviously, this means that there's an active, or there's an act of doing these things. How do you omit then in terms of, the problem is that you should be in a position to account at the end of the day. Because once you put it there, once this surveillance comes through and through, anybody, it's not about two people, anybody, wherever you are, your information are being accessed through a number of things, through a number of instruments. So once that is taken in, there should be a responsibility. Look at what has happened with a grant system, the current issues of SARS and all those things. Those informations, once they are taken, they have to be taken with responsibility. But the government has not been very actively involved in terms of, or all the time when they're supposed to account, they will tell you that there's a measurement that is coming, but there's no such when they start to take that information.
Yes, but I mean, you also have from the private sector wanting to deter any further involvement from government, saying that the way we handle our business, the last thing we need is to have Big Brother looking at how we access information or what we do with the data we have of our clients.
Well, there's no question that industrial espionage used to be guys breaking into buildings, stealing documents, stealing plans, doing these sort of things. We live in an age of digital, we live in the age of connectivity, we live in the age of cyber everything. So the crime has moved into the cyber realm, and this is part of it. Hacking databases, getting into people's servers have multiple reasons. And you'll find that the major companies, all companies, have certain level of security built in. There's an enormous industry in stopping these various hacks and breaking, down the code that they use to hack into various computers. But it's a cat and mouse problem. In other words, it's so much money involved. It's billions of dollars globally in cybercrime that is certainly worthwhile going for. And what is happening is that these cyber criminals are at the cutting edge of technology. And as these hacks are discovered, as these problems are exposed, obviously the big companies, Microsoft, Google, all the network companies come up with solutions and they block the various methods that they use to get in. But the fact is they do get in. The danger is once your information's there, what do you do about it? How do you protect yourself? And that's key in this whole business.
Yeah, because as the point I was making is that ultimately and I've had a situation where there was an electronic payment done when I was in possession of my credit card at a different location for that matter, but I had used it at a filling station or wherever, and I get a notification that says, 6,000 whatever amount was taken off. And the banks then would have to go into their own forensics, and it's a whole cumbersome exercise before
Absolutely.
you reimbursed.
Absolutely.
So how then do you protect yourself?
Well, the best way to protect yourself, honestly, is to be really vigilant. I mean, understand one thing, that there is a website, interestingly, that you can go to right now. Everybody out there can go to a website. It's called Have I Been Pawned? P-A-W-N-D. N-E-D. P-W-N-E-D. P-W-N-E-D. Have I Been, B-E-N, P-W-N-E-D. And if you put your email address in there, it will tell you, in fact, these are the people who discovered the hack and discovered that database online. So if you go and then you put your email address, it'll actually tell you if your email address has been compromised and where it's been compromised, on what hacks around the world. So there were hacks for Adobe, there were hacks on Sony. There was recently a Ster-Kinekor hack in South Africa where all the information, credit cards, personal information was compromised and shared on the web. And it'll give you information of how to do it. The most important thing to do then is to change all your passwords and not use one password for everything. And also be vigilant. I mean, having the notifications on your bank helps you. If you get a notification, don't ignore it. Check to see actively that it's not something that you did or didn't do.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways to protect yourself.
But Mr. Shabala, you seem to lean more towards the government's general overarching responsibility from a state security point of view. I mean, we've seen how the integrated financial management system kind of failed, where they were trying to automate and streamline payments and procurement processes within government. So how then is the government even adequately capacitated to do that?
The government has got a role to regulate. That is clearly their role. And the government has to see to it. You've got the intelligence units in this country. It has to see to it that people are not vulnerable. Because if the private sector says to you, I don't want to be overly regulated, and at the same time says, be vigilant. So that is a task that they are putting now to the ordinary person on the street, who is not even aware of how to be vigilant, who is not related. The public interest demands that these people must be protected. So if you're pointing at the private sector, you might not be able to reach because they don't have a mandate to do that. So the government has to work with these things. Once you go to the cyber scenario, you have to understand, you cannot allow cybercrime to just overwhelm you as if you are not a state, you are not resourced. Our belief is that the government is resourced intensively. And if it's not, then it has to do something about it. Because our people here, even as a comparison with Americans is something different. Our people here, most of them who are getting this information lost from them and is used differently, are very much lowly educated. They don't know, they cannot be that sufficiently vigilant timelessly as they are required to do. So if the private sector is saying they must be compromised, then we'll face the government say, regulate these things, make it work. Otherwise it means you are not doing your job.
Mr. Ambrose?
I think that there's definitely a strong need for the government to be vigilant in this regard and use the police force, use the resources they have in order to track down and assist. But as I say, this is a global problem. And the government already is working with Interpol, with the various international agencies to try to track down these people, try to track down the various cyber criminals and the people who actually work actively to do this type of thing. But I think in many ways this is a shock to get all this information out there in the public domain. But in truth, it's a business. crime is a business, and they will obviously go for the biggest targets first. And they will not just try attack people who have nothing to share or nothing to give. But the fact is that all of us are vulnerable at some level or another. And I do believe that most companies are extremely vigilant because it's their life. If their information is compromised, they could lose potentially their whole business.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of government, the law enforcement, the intelligence agencies, global intelligence agencies and law enforcement to try to keep the whole cybercrime environment under control. But it is the new frontier in crime in the world, in fact.
Now, how do you mitigate then with this information, 33 million of our private accounts and details being out there somewhere? How do you mitigate it from a national cyber ransom situation?
Well, I don't think that the information would be used at that scale. As I said, most of the cybercrime today, the phishing type of things, the social engineering is much more targeted. They're not just going to randomly use someone's phone number, address, and details. They put it together. It's a much more targeted type setup. So I think the danger is not as big as people would imagine. It's not nice to know that your information's out there for anybody to use, but at the same time, a lot of that information is available off public databases in any event. You know, you can find out. You've got phone books. There's databases of information about all these people anyway. It's just the sheer fact that so much information was spread in such a comprehensive and easily accessible manner. That is what makes it shocking. And second of all, I think that all the companies, the banks do a really, really good job at protecting your money, at protecting your account, and they've got systems in place to detect if fraud occurs. You get phone calls on your credit card, you get SMSs, and the government and a lot of the other places where these sort of things could potentially affect people, individuals, you and I, do quite a good job at making sure fingerprint, and there's a lot of different ways to verify identity. So there is a risk out there. I don't think it's as huge as people may think, but the simple fact is that cybercrime and these sorts of database hacks are going to happen, and they're going to happen every now and then. And then just be a little bit more vigilant, change your passwords, be very careful on how you transact and act online, and you should be good.
Yeah, very briefly, Mr. Shabalala.
I wish we could also deal it differently. We should say that because just to trace after criminals, you are not doing anything good, because it means you are saying somebody must suffer first and then we'll see the extent and try to prevent that thing. I think there should be a preventive ways of dealing with this issue, because it really exposes, I understand the complexity of these things, but it really touches a number of people's lives that cannot be really just looked at and say people will be. It's very difficult to get
after the fact. I hear you that the inconvenience and compromise.
All that thing.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks indeed for your time. Alfred Shabalala with the Right to Know campaign as an activist, and we have Stephen Ambrose, Strategy Works Consulting Managing Director and CEO. Thanks indeed for joining us. And that website again, it is Have I Been Pawned, and pawned is pwnd.co.za. Have I Been Pawned, pwnd.co.za, and you can log on with your email to see if you
don't
have
even
been
need
affected.
to log on.
You don't even need to log on.
Just put your email in.
We'll put that on our Twitter handle as well. Thanks indeed to our guests. Now on to other stories. The banning order against BLF marching to the KPMG was lifted by the Johannesburg Magistrates Court. The BLF was prevented by the Johannesburg Metro Police Department to march to KPMG headquarters on the 28th of September, calling the march illegal and unlawful. Black First, the Land First President Andile Mqitama expressed his satisfaction with the judgment. BLF will now march to the audit firm's office.
As BLF were celebrating, we knew that the decision of the court would favor us. KPMG fell because the judgment, which is scathing on the police, the Metro Police who are under the DA, judgment shows that they did not follow the law, they did not even respect our rights. The administration of a fundamental right to protest has been undermined completely by the DA.
And the Black First, the Land First movement is demanding that all audits and investigations by KPMG be reviewed. KPMG should immediately withdraw its report upon which the 783 charges against President Jacob Zuma were formulated. KPMG apologized for being an agent of white monopoly capital and regime change, or at least that's a demand from BLF, and KPMG should reveal the pressure put by the white monopoly capital agencies to withdraw its report on the rogue unit at SARS. And Mineral Resources Minister Mosebenzi Zwane came out guns blazing as the Portfolio Committee on Mineral Resources questioned him on allegations of state capture. The minister maintained that he has a good track record in creating jobs in the mining industry and that he continues to transform the sector. Let's take a look.
In answering to allegations of state capture, Zwane made it clear to the members of the committee that they should not base their questioning on allegations alone, but rather on fact.
As honorable members, we should be honorable enough to deal with facts, not allegations, not media speculations. I would have been happy if the letter had went to specifics in terms of specifically what are the questions that I need to answer relating to this issue of state capture, so that I know and I'm prepared to answer any question that is related to my work that members feel that they need to get more information on.
When asked about his relationship with the Gupta brothers, Zwane confirmed that he saw nothing wrong with meeting them and that as a leader, he had to meet with a number of people regardless about how he feels about them.
If there is any problem from anybody with the Guptas, please let me know. I'm not part of that problem. And I can honestly tell this portfolio committee, if there's a need to meet them tomorrow, I'll meet them publicly anywhere, so that you are all aware that I do not have an issue with them currently, unless there is an issue that needs me to change my view on any of the stakeholders. I continue to meet with people who insult me in media every day, but I meet with them because I'm a leader.
The minister also explained his trip to Dubai, India and Switzerland.
I did go to India. I did go to Switzerland. I did go to Dubai. The details of my trips, as members would want to get, are on my answering papers, the subject of the court. So I think at that particular stage, my request is that let's deal with them at that particular stage.
After the hearing, the Department of Mineral Resources released a statement summarizing the minister's point of view, saying that he won't be tried in the court of public perception and that he's working towards transforming the mining sector for the benefit of all South Africans. ANN7, Bureau Report.
And just a day after taking over as Minister of Higher Education, Professor Hlengiwe Mkhize has her work cut out. Her first task was to deal with the march by hundreds of students affiliated to the Pan-Africanist Student Movement of Azania. The students handed in a list of demands for the new minister to take action on. ANN7 reporter Valerie Robinson was there.
The student march that started at Church Square in Pretoria and proceeded to the Union buildings saw two memorandums being handed over. The memorandums were received by the representatives of Treasury and President Zuma's students demand free education.
Minister of Finance, since assumed in office, didn't speak anything in terms of free education. Was quiet, traveling all over, and with his friend, President Jacob Zuma, that is busy reshuffling the council, must tell us is capable to take a decision. Even now, we believe on him that is capable to take a decision of giving us an announced free education.
So we have VET here, we have UJ, we have VAL, we have all TUT campuses here. Currently, we've seen that we are not being taken serious. We've been standing here, no one is arriving. We're waiting for the president to come here and address us and tell us what's happening.
Students praised the change of the Minister of Higher Education following the cabinet reshuffle that took place this week.
There's a new minister that will be sworn in office, and we therefore demand that also the new minister be able to remove all suspensions and make sure that all our comrades come back to the system. Yes. If we don't get a favorable response, yes, there will be an uprising. That's one thing that we can guarantee everyone.
Some of the demands brought forward by the students include changing NSFAS from a loan system to that of a bursary. They've given government 2 weeks in which to respond, after which they say there will be no more nice ties of handing over the memorandums. With Valerie Robertson for AN7, Pretoria.
And that's a look at the latest news headlines. Do stay with us. We're back with an update just after the short break. But first, let's take a look at the weather.